Sarah.
I think let's go ahead and we'll kick it off, and then as others join us, then we'll keep rolling. But I think we've got a couple more coming in, but we will be mindful of everyone's time and get us kick started. So good morning to everybody on the call. Thank you very much for joining us on this Wednesday morning. We also want to say thank you very much to Northrop Grumman Federal Credit Union for helping us reach those that are at Northrop for their Wednesday webinar series. For those of you that are new to Blue Heron, we are based out of Annapolis, Maryland, but we have the privilege of working with clients all over the country. So we really appreciate you hopping on here today. My name is Sarah Cosmerl.
And I'm Margie Cosmo.
Uh,
And yes, we are related.
Yes, if you couldn't tell from the same last name. So today we are doing our women's presentation in honor of Women's History Month. So all of us on this call, savvy women looking to gain some more knowledge and confidence when it comes to our financial picture. So what we will be covering today is, again, really geared towards women and the unique choices that we have, and in some case challenges, and how we are able to navigate those. Some you may have already experienced, others might be kind of a forewarning of what to expect and how we can combat that. So we want to know what matters to you at each stage of life and what those concerns are. We'll also talk about how to navigate those successfully, recognize financial challenges that are unique to women, and get help when you need it. We are here as a resource. Our contact information will be at the end of all the slides. Both Margie and I love providing financial education, and we especially love providing financial education to women and helping to build that confidence and that knowledge base. So today, we hope if it is one nugget of new information that you can apply to your own financial goals, that's a win in our book. But again, we're here as a resource as you need it. So the question up at the top, what keeps you up at night? For some of you, maybe you didn't sleep last night. So a couple of these are coming to your mind right away. And maybe as I'm talking, even if you had a good night's sleep last night, you think about some of those concerns that do come to your front of mind. And as we start over here on the one side of the screen, early life stages, we think those in their 20s and their 30s, they have graduated college, and now it is the question of, well, how am I going to pay off this debt? Because the student loans, those are growing and becoming a very commonplace for those that decide to go the route of college. So how am I going to go about paying off this debt? Also, when we get out of college, we think, all right, now it's time to find a job. How am I going to pay these bills? What area do I want to explore? Maybe it's the first thing that comes about so that I can start to pay off this debt and other living expenses that I need. And then just the overall general future. There's so many unknowns coming out of college, being in your 20s and 30s. Really, at any stage, the future is unknown. So this can apply to more than just this category as well. We move into the midlife stage. So you've found that job, maybe you're settling into a career. Maybe that can be a stressor. Maybe you're thinking, is this the career I want to continue on? Are there other things that are calling you? Maybe balancing what's going on at home with at work. So that's one. Marriage, finances, certainly those two can be stressors as you're coming together now to work with a partner on this kind of joint combined financial goal and the different things that are coming up there. This is sandwiched between the early life stage and the later life stage, but just that caring for a child, maybe an ill spouse, parent, or sibling, while also trying to accomplish your goals and care for yourself. So really being sandwiched in between caring for others can be a unique challenge. Retirement, trying to do all of these other things while still saving for those goals for yourself, which, as I rattle off all these things, can really seem like everything is keeping you up at night, perhaps at this stage. And then we move on to the later life stage. These are for the people on the call that are maybe looking to retire soon. Maybe you have retired healthcare and we think about the cost and the growing cost of healthcare, that can certainly be a concern. It's one that we hear about and one that we have to plan for. Beyond just healthcare, I think health in general is a big concern, and it can be a concern at any life stage, but as you age, really thinking that anything can happen and not taking for granted the health that you do have. Another piece of healthcare, Margie will talk about it later, is long-term care, what those costs would be if the need arises. Social Security, whether that's strategy, again, that's something we spend a lot of time talking with our clients about, not just Social Security, but also income strategies in general from the nest egg. And lastly, one that's on the minds of many people is I don't want to outlive my money. So what planning and strategizing can I do today so that I am not having that worry out there? And we'll be diving into all of these life stages. So here we are going to take a time machine back to the 1950s, and this is actually a graphic out of a 1950s home ec textbook. And this chapter, this unit, was about how to be a good homemaker and a good housewife. And the goal is that the house is clean and you have dinner waiting on the table when your husband gets home from work. And that's how you are a good homemaker or housewife. And we think about what a shift has been made from the 1950s and really that big transition being the 1970s when women were entering the workforce in droves and not just having jobs, but full-blown careers, and how that really took this image and turned it on its head when we think about what the home dynamic looks like, as well as work for women. How things have changed for women. I think these stats are pretty amazing. So we look back to 1950 and 30% of the US labor force was comprised of women. Fast forward to today, 2023, that's 59%. So the majority of those in the workforce are women. During COVID, there was some worry because as childcare was shut down, as schools were getting shut down, women were leaving the workforce, and about 2 million women left the workforce by the beginning of 2021. So there's a lot of worry with, okay, this progress that we've made here, is that going backwards? It did fall to about 57%, but now back to 59% in 2023. Down here at the bottom, we have 12% of women were their family's breadwinners in 1967. Fast forward to 2022, and that's about 30%. So thinking back to that home ec picture and what that looked like versus now, where 30% of women are their primary family breadwinner, as well as 59% of women in the workforce. So now we're going to dive into the different life stages and challenges or worries and how to address those. So for those, again, in 20s and 30s, credit becomes a popular word, whether it is through student loans, it's through credit cards, mortgage, car payments. This is when that credit building starts. So what impacts your credit score? The first, the amount you owe on current loans. So if, let's say your credit limit is 15,000 and you're pushing up towards that limit versus utilizing less than that, that's going to impact your credit score. Interest rates can be such a doozy and very detrimental to those who are carrying debt, especially on those credit cards, because they can be high 20s, which it just makes it very difficult to pay off that debt. So if you know that you're carrying debt, if anything, just an action item from this call is going and looking at what those interest rates are on your debt, because some are really staggering and it just makes it difficult to get out from under. Payment history, this is the most important one, is making sure that you are making those payments on time and not late, because a missed payment can really derail things when it comes to your credit score. Length of credit history, again, for those in this early stage, this is when they are starting to utilize that credit and use the credit. So it's going to be on that shorter end of the history, but as you continue to have different credit opportunities, it's going to lengthen things. And then credit mix, again, as you have a longer period where you're using credit, you're going to have different types of credit. Maybe it's a mortgage versus just having a credit card. The revolving debt and all of that goes into the credit mix. Okay, so we have credit. how do we keep it healthy and a good credit score? The first, when we look back at payment history, very important, we want to pay the bills on time. Even if you are adamant about going in a couple of times a month to pay off your credit card, it cannot hurt to have auto payments set up in the event that you get busy and you don't go in to pay it off. So that's one easy thing you can set up today, is just have those set up on auto pay. The next is keep credit card balances low. We talked about that first bullet point on the other column, the amount you owe. Looking at credit cards not as free money, so to speak, but really what could I pay off if I needed to, and not over utilizing what that balance is. Credit cards, they can come to you with offers. Do you want to increase your balance? Do you want to increase your balance? Looking at what you make and saying, okay, is that going to be tempting to overutilize and over leverage myself if I don't have the funds today to be paying that off? Open credit only when you need it. I'm sure we can have this image conjured up of maybe we've been in a department store and the woman in front of us or the man in front of us goes to pay for something and there's a million different store credit cards. So really only opening credit when you need it, and points are great and it can be a perk to using credit cards, but not having every credit card available to get all the different points, because it just makes it very difficult to keep track of. Check your credit score once a year. I would encourage you to check it maybe more than once a year, but at least once a year, and it's free. creditkarma.com. I personally use Credit Karma. RG, I think you might also use Credit Karma. Annualcreditreport.com. Just periodically looking to see, where is my credit? Is all the credit that is showing up I'm aware of? A lot of credit cards now have credit scores integrated into their apps, but just to other websites. And one thing that's not up here that I would go so far as to do is, if you don't need to use your credit or you're not going to be opening up a new credit anytime soon, freezing your credit, knowing no one is opening credit without you knowing about it. And if you needed to apply for a mortgage or open a new credit card, something, you could always unfreeze the credit, but just another sleep at night tool, knowing it's frozen, no new credit is getting opened. Making a budget. So whether it is coming out of college and having this income, or maybe you have a job that's paying more and you're trying to get used to this new flow of income, creating a budget. And I think a lot of times budgets, the word budget makes people nervous. People start sweating, they get kind of clamped up, but really thinking about it as realizing where your money is going each month. And yes, trying to follow this back of the napkin rule of 50% to necessities, things like housing, groceries, insurance, things you know you have to pay each month. Life is a balance, and we have to still be living for today while we have these future goals out there. So making sure you're taking time and doing things for yourself as well. And then 20% to financial goals. So whether that's taking advantage of your 401k, Roth IRA contributions, making sure you have that emergency fund, those all go into financial goals. And this next slide here, I'll just start with not saying that wants come before necessities, but just this idea of thinking about turning that around so that financial goals are going first, because we think about, okay, if we went back to that old model of necessities and wants first, then saving for financial goals. If we were paid our paycheck before paying ourselves, and at the end of the month, we were told, okay, now save for those financial goals, we probably wouldn't have the 20% towards it. It would probably go more towards the wants. So whether it's through the 401k plan, it's a great way to sock money away before it even comes into your bank account, that you know you're taking advantage of that. If you have other savings accounts, just having it go direct deposit right from the paycheck. That way you're not having to, at the end of each month, sock money away. The power of compounding. We love all these different slides that just illustrate what we talk about often, but this is just a great and powerful slide, I think, especially for young investors. It can sometimes feel like, okay, maybe I don't have the funds that somebody in their mid stage or late stage that we'll talk about have, but truly the biggest asset you have is time, and time in the market. There is no amount that is too small. Every bit makes a difference. And I think it really, when you have the time in the market and you start to see the power of compounding interest, that is really what can be a huge motivator to continue to save, continue to sock away money here. So here we have the 3% rate of return over these 40 years, 5%, and then lastly 6%. They each put in $10,000 and they all have vastly different amounts come the end of the 40 years. And really, the two I'll draw your attention to, the 3%, this person maybe says, I feel really uncomfortable with the markets. The ups and downs make me uncomfortable. I'd really rather just save into cash. And we see the vast difference between someone that maybe just saves into a cash instrument versus someone that is patient, has a long-term view, and invests in the stock market, whether that's the 5 or 6% rate of return here. Brushing up on benefits. Again, whether this is early stage, mid stage, maybe you're making a career change or a job change, it is certainly worth it to take a look at your benefits. Benefits change, different options are available. This first one here with the retirement plan, taking a look at the options within your 401k plan. A big one that we see oftentimes is many people are putting money into the pre-tax bucket of their 401k, not realizing that they have the wherewithal and that they had the availability to put money into the Roth 401k. So again, just an action following this seminar, taking a look and seeing where are your contributions going and are you utilizing both buckets, the Roth bucket, company match, making sure that you are taking full advantage of the company match. If they are giving you 3% and you need to put in 5% to get that, making sure you're putting in that full 5%. And really, that's a great starting point for those coming out of college and not sure where to start. That's the minimum, because if we were walking down the street and we saw money on the ground, we would not pass it by. Leaving the company match is the same thing. We don't want to pass up that extra additional contribution. Vesting period, this is important to consider, especially if you are looking to move jobs, knowing, okay, when does my money become my money? Because there are some periods that you have to be with the company in order for all of the company match to be your contribution. Health insurance coverage, this is an important one. Another piece of this is HSA. If you have an HSA, a health savings account available to you, are you participating in the account? And again, every little bit counts. It's a great spot to have triple tax-free going in. You actually can invest those dollars so it can have growth, as well as tax-free when they come out to be used for those qualified health expenses. For those looking to expand their family, maternity, paternity, adoption leave, those are important considerations, especially for this next gen of employees coming out of college. Tuition reimbursement for those looking to further their education, as well as student loan repayment assistance. These become big items when people are looking for employers. So regardless of where you are, if you're looking to make a change or you just haven't brushed up on your benefits in a while, we'd highly encourage you to take a look there. All right, so we're moving into the middle stage of life, and it's the juggling act. And I can just see this illustration of, okay, you're juggling, maybe it's kids, maybe it's marriage, it's saving for retirement, excelling in your career, trying to be a good sister and a good friend. And it can just feel like a juggling act, whether you're in it right now or you've been in it. I think that pretty perfectly sums up this stage of life right here. A big one for those that are married, merging finances. That's a huge one. I got married in April, so this one is pretty fitting here. But I think these 3 words at the top just very accurately describe reminders when talking about finances, especially in marriage or in a partnership. Communicate, collaborate, and compromise. Talking with your partner about your financial goals. Talk is a big piece, because sometimes it can feel uncomfortable to talk about money. Everyone comes from different backgrounds in regards to money. So really just kind of talking, getting it out there, trying to understand where your significant other partner is coming from in their mindset surrounding money. Consider prenuptial agreement. You are coming to the table with different asset amounts and it would give you peace of mind. Certainly that could be something you could consider. Compare your credit score, savings, spending habits. Typically in a marriage, there is a saver and a spender. And so again, trying to come and find a common ground so the spender doesn't feel like they're so beholden to this budget that you're setting them up for disappointment, and that the spender isn't feeling this intense anxiety that income is flowing out the door each month. So talking about those different spending habits, discuss how much you would spend without telling the other spouse. This is a good proactive question, maybe versus a reactive question of it's happened and we should have had a discussion prior. Create a budget for present and future needs. Again, just evaluating where cash flow is going in your working years. Sometimes it can feel like, okay, I know the bills are getting paid, money is flowing out, but where is it going? So taking account, sitting down, looking at where those dollars are flowing, working on long-term savings goals. Maybe you two have different savings goals, so encouraging each other to accomplish those and working together on those joint goals. This one applies for anybody in any life stage, whether you are married or not. Take a look at your beneficiaries. If it has been a while, make sure that those beneficiaries are who you wish to be listed. Another step further, estate planning, documents like wills, powers of attorney, if you have kids, guardianship documents. These are all important things that, while not the most exciting thing to talk about, they're necessary, and it's those different sleep at night things to have in place to know that you're set.
So Sarah, while we're on that, I think sometimes, when we think about marriages and these items, that we think about younger people getting married. But I will say that we see those second and even third marriages later on, whether there's a divorce or a deceased spouse. And the prenup, that second bullet there, I see that perhaps more applicable to later on marriages, to the seniors in the room, and or if there's children from prior marriages and assets that are brought to the table. So just thought I'd make a mention that, marriage can happen at any age, and we do see it across our client base where there are marriages later in 50s, 60s, 70s, and even 80s.
Yeah, great point there. So moving into our single ladies on the call, this is a growing demographic, just as it says up here on the screen. I think I've got a stat here that in 2009, the percentage of American women that were married dropped to 15%. So being single has its own considerations when thinking about savings goals and accomplishing different financial goals. The first that comes to mind is your savings account and that emergency fund for those that have significant others or are married. That 6 to 12 months, it can lead maybe more towards that 6 months because you have two incomes. For those that are living off one income, having closer to that 12 months of living expenses if something were to happen there. Another consideration being long-term care. If a need were to arise, what is the plan in place beyond just, yes, the financing and how can we leverage those dollars, but really having that plan in place and giving thought to it. Another one being having that community and having those people that can step in for something as little as driving you to a surgery or helping you pick up groceries if something were to happen, but who's in your corner if you needed assistance with your finances and that day to day. It's important to think about who is that and who could you lean on for that. And here just illustrates the power of saving early and putting funds away and how all these different pieces come together, especially when you're contributing to something like your 401k. So this is depicting someone that's 22%. They came out of college, maybe 3% was where their company match was. So they're putting in 3 to get that company match, auto escalating to 10%. Here, more information about the employer match, but just seeing, okay, we have their contribution, the match on top of it, and then the investment return. So being sure to take advantage of time in the market, regardless of what stage you're in. It's never too late looking to save where you can today.
Okay, so I'm going to step in here and talk a bit about the caregiving role that many of us women, we just end up being that person. And whether it's for kids or whether it's for aging parents, many of my peers, there's those who are absolutely helping out with aging parents at this point. And having been a long time working mom, I know that juggle act from decades of raising kids and working. But what we have to be thinking about as best we can when there are these step backs out of the work mode, maybe it's going to part-time, maybe it's completely stepping out of the workforce for some period of time. And then if possible, how can we plan in advance for these periods of, again, not being in the workforce. So let's just keep on taking a look here at the costs associated with. So this is really the chart that Sarah just showed us a minute ago, but we're going to take it a step further and look at, again, just think back to early right out of college maybe, or if it's not you, think about kids who are getting ready to graduate from college and coming into the workforce. So we can't stress enough, that's the reason this chart's up here multiple times, that starting early is super important, and to get that compounding. So at the top there, you see that 1.3 million nest egg. All of the assumptions here is for the continuance of coming into the workforce, having a starting salary at 40,000, having ongoing pay increases at 2% per year, an employee match of 3 that actually jumps up for to 4.5 is what the assumption is in here, and then rates of return we're looking at 6%. So this is showing us in the top scenario that there was no interruption. The second scenario, we're looking at some step back but staying invested. And then, and Sarah touched on this before, if we're too conservative, how those rates of return end up impacting the nest egg. So certainly all of these are sizable amounts for later on in life at retirement timeframe. And once again, we're going to talk about how important it is to get on board early, and please pass this on to the kids, and finding those investment vehicles, and certainly maximizing what one can do on the work front, and then continue to increase that contribution. Thankfully, in today's world, there's an auto increase that you can click on, or those coming into the workforce to increase. So here we're looking at a slide that's showing us these different breaks and then the impact. Now, this is not saying, I mean, certainly if there is one spouse partner who decides to take some time off and be a stay-at-home mom or dad, that's a wonderful gift. And yet again, as financial planners, we want to make sure that we're cognizant of what that financial impact can look like. So this is over a 43-year period. And once again, how these breaks in, I was going to say breaks in service, but it is breaks in service, how that can impact the savings. So I think we banged the table enough on the fact that we want to make sure that that full company match is tackled. It's sometimes that first place to go if one is going through financial hardship to lower the 401k or IRA contributions. But please again just reassess before giving up any of the quote, free money that's coming from the employer. At the very bottom here, you're looking at eventual retirement income based on what those earnings or the nest egg has grown to. Once again, you can see how that changes from that almost 95,000 to 67,000 to 31,000. And then I will speak to this because this certainly happens more frequently in today's world. Kids may go off to college and then lo and behold, guess what? They're back in the nest again for some period of time. Now, a lot of that has to do with where we are economically right now. And we also are in this era where affordable housing is very difficult. So there's good reason for kids to come back. Speaking as, again, a mom who over the course of my kids' lifetime, they have come back into the nest for one reason or the other. But I think it's super important to just remind those who are attending today that, not to do this at the sacrifice of your own retirement. Occasionally, we will hear about those who are providing financial assistance, which is all well and good, but I can't stress enough, not to the detriment of your own retirement. That's super important. Sarah touched on it before, and we do later on in the year. November is Long-Term Care Awareness Month, and we will do an educational presentation. And if you have any questions at all on this subject, by all means, reach out to us. But it's super important that we recognize what the cost of eventual care may look like, but where it is even today, and that it's growing at a higher inflation rate than just our regular everyday goods. So in today's world, $255 per day, nursing home cost, almost $5,000 for in-home care. And then when we think about that, so, the $5,000 in-home care, 12 months, $60,000, and an average length of time for need of 3 years. And remember, that could be a lot longer, it might be less, and having a plan, because by not planning, that becomes the plan. And then unfortunately, there's crisis mode and trying to figure out, well, how would care be handled? So in our world, the financial world, we have solutions to this that are varied, and a lot of it does depend on health, but not always. So if you have questions, again, and want to explore, by all means, please reach out to us. All right, probably enough said on that topic as far as the cost, but then as far as, just where we are from a generation standpoint, this 10,000 baby boomers hitting 65 every single day until 2030. And for those of us who are fortunate to still have living parents, and at some point, there is likely to be some sort of care need. And whether you collectively decide as a family that you will be caring for that loved one, again, it just comes back to planning. So a couple stats on the slide here: 69% of Americans have done little or no long-term care planning. I can think of clients who have said, oh, the kids will take care of me. And that's wonderful. But my second question on that would be, okay, are the kids aware that that's what the plan is? And making sure that there's open conversations with the family and with siblings. There are 48 million caregivers in the US. 89% of them are caring for a relative. So the bulk of care is coming from a relative. And then the last one here, virtually all caregivers had at least one caregiving expense over the course of the last year, with 78% of caregivers incurring out-of-pocket cost. So when we look at retirement planning, we have to also consider the impact if these needs arise, and then how are they going to be tackled? All right, and then moving on to the later life stage, let's talk a bit about Social Security. We will have a full Social Security webinar within the next couple of months. We'll be sure that you get those invitations. But when we look at, once again, the stats of where we are today, women don't have as much access to the defined benefit plans. Now, defined benefit plan is a pension, and many years ago, the vast majority of corporate America and government entities had some type of defined benefit plan. We don't have that to the extent today. In fact, it becomes more and more rare that there is a corporate type of benefit plan. And then when we think about, turning on Social Security, sometimes that's the low-hanging fruit. It's like, hey, I want to jump on that at age 62 without full understanding of the discount that one is taking by taking that Social Security benefit. So at such I will say a younger age, as opposed to if they would push off, and even every month that amount is increasing 7.5% average per year from 62 to 67, and then thereafter 8%. So it's important to look at the big picture. There are other strategies that can be employed in order to let that Social Security benefit go out a couple years for that higher amount. We fully understand that we have a Social Security crunch, for lack of a better word, coming in 2034. I don't want to belittle the fact that we've got to get it together. Otherwise, there is the potential for reduced benefits. The system has to be adjusted. So that may be for younger employees, but we're going to go with what we know today. And that is by pushing off Social Security, that it will be a higher amount later. So just looking at these from different aspects. So if one is single, and if you consider that you've got 40 quarters that go into the Social Security calculator, so 10 years, whether there's interruption, no interruption. And as time goes on, if you're earning more, then those early years fall off and it makes for a higher calculation amount. If you're married, there are considerations. So looking at both spouses' Social Security benefits and being strategic about it. Perhaps, as the slide shows us, that encouraging the spouse with a higher benefit to let it grow, and maybe kicking off the other spouses to have some stopgap in there for income to come in, and keeping in the back of one's mind that when one passes, it is the higher Social Security that will be the Social Security benefit that is left. If you are divorced and you were married for 10 years or more, you may very well qualify for benefits off your ex-spouse. And then the last on here is if you're widowed, that gives just that much more flexibility as far as taking your benefit and then possibly switching over if it's applicable and there's greater reward on that side later. So number one, just don't jump at it first thing at 62 just because you can, and consider a lot of these different options that we're talking about. So we as gals end up costing more, and it's primarily here, not because we're spending more on shoes, but it's because we're tending to live longer. A woman that's age 65, the life expectancy there is 90. This really hasn't changed too much over the course of time, that we as women tend to live longer. We can all speculate on why that might be the case, but I won't go there right now. And then to just be cognizant of the fact, and this is a conversation that we have time and time again, as we run through our analysis and we build it out to age 100, we get usually some chuckles in the room, but we all can probably think of folks who are living into their 90s and possibly relatives living to 100. What we don't want to do is run out of money. So there is additional savings if you think about the cost of care, and this is not including long-term care, just medical care, period. I love this little cartoon here, and I think it's just a great reminder that many different phases of life that we go through, from childhood through our growing up years into teen years, into post-teen 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. And as the old woman on the bottom right says, well, that sucked. I prefer not to think that it has, that, there's certainly challenges on any of our life journeys. And what we really, as women, I think what we are strong in our communication and knowing when to ask for help. And whether that's, taking a walk with a girlfriend and just kind of letting it out, however that might be, but also to reach out on the financial front. If you have questions, I hope as you've come to know Blue Heron Financial Group, that we are very approachable. I say it at least once a week. There are no dumb questions at all, and that's how we learn. Here's another cute little cartoon, and it kind of speaks to what I'm passionate about and Sarah's passionate about, and really all of us here are. And I'll just read the caption here. Skip to the part where the princess creates multiple streams of income, builds wealth, and invests it all in cash flowing assets. Now, I don't know, maybe that was me talking to my dad way back in the day. My daughters, I think, probably had a leg up because they would hear a lot of terms thrown around even at the dinner table. And I remember my oldest daughter, somewhat, it almost sounded like a complaint, but not really. Like, I'm the only one of my friends that has a money market and a Roth IRA and a checking account. So point here is, let's have those conversations. Let's get comfortable with sharing financial terms and strategies as early in life as possible, so that markets aren't a scary place, that concepts of investing are truly taken to heart in order to pave the way for a safe and healthy financial future. So we talked about some different areas today. And number one, identifying the needs. That is short term, that is long term, that is anywhere in between. So it could be a first time home buyer. How are we going to do this? And or it could be, the need out there for planning for stepping out of the workforce or stepping back in the workforce. And how are we going to continue to make sure that that nest egg is going to be intact in the future? Number two, meet with your financial advisor or investment professional. There are all kinds of stats that show that working with a financial professional helps to enhance that end result, not just from a return standpoint, but yes, that too, but keeping you on track. That's our job each and every day. And then building out your plan. And that will change over time depending on, again, just generationally, where you are in your career or later life or early. So we'll be closing down here in just a minute. I am populating this here, this slide, because it seems that we are running into this a bit more. Maybe it is the aging baby boom population and or the prior generation passing on. This is, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's called Settling an Estate Successfully, a document locator. So we'll send this out as a follow-up. It's a great piece because we're all very busy, but to have that table of contents, if you will, that can be either provided to a trusted person, family, friend, of where the documents are. This all goes back to planning and not having to figure things out in crisis mode. So it's just a great piece. We applaud MFS for putting this out that we can share it with you. So as we wind down here, Sarah talked about a budget. It's not scary. It's just really to help you dig in and see where the incoming versus the outgoing is. And the more information that we have, the better we can plan. Knowing what those income needs later in life will be. We do a lot, primarily, it's what we do here, is plan for the future, whether that's for college education for kids, grandkids, or retirement planning, and identifying what that income need may be later. Diversification, dollar cost averaging, staying in the market, whether it's good times, bad times, we still need to participate, not try to time the market. And if you're so conservative, we have tools in the toolbox to answer to that, but still to be able to participate for those long-term returns. We talked about professional advice, financial limits for adult kids. I'm all for kids having skin in the game. If they're moving back home and they have a job, I can think of a client who had rent money required for the kids moving back home. At the end, they ended up turning it back over to the kid when they were buying a home. So that was a win-win, taught them, yeah, there's bills to be paid. Goals we've touched on for sure, and those goals vary. It could be a second home. It could be a world, well, not a world cruise maybe, but a cruise. So the other part are more, again, deliberate goals such as eventual retirement. Knowing the backup plan if a spouse passes away prematurely, you know, what is the plan there? And again, we can all think of loved ones who have passed at not an expected period of time. And staying educated. We're all about the education, so stay tuned for more of our sessions. This is a really busy chart. I don't want you to get overwhelmed by it, but the big takeaway here is all of those little blocks are representing different areas of the market. We do not want to become so enamored with, for example, where stocks, large cap has been leading the way with these big tech names, but the market will make a fool out of any one of us if we put all of our eggs in one basket. We need to make sure that we're diversified. So when we go through periods like 2022, when the market was down, both stock and bond, that we have areas to go to if we're having to come up with some distribution money. So I know that's a lot going on there, but the big takeaway here is to diversify. Don't get so sucked into the news events. So Sarah, we can just, you know, these are where this methodology came from, and then we'll put our contact information on after the slides. Any questions resulting from this presentation or any other presentation, please reach out to Debbie, who can get your questions to us. If you'd like to schedule a time, a Zoom, a phone call, again, please reach out to Debbie. We'll make sure that we get that answered. We thank you for your attendance today. We thank Northrop Grumman Federal Credit Union for our 24-year relationship on April 1st, which is kind of crazy. So have a wonderful rest of your week, long weekend if you have one. Happy Easter,